Hi, I'm Henry. I'm a student here at Central Washington University, and I've been doing some research. I've been looking at Titan. Been doing some research with Dr. Snowden and looking at Titan and trying to explain some data that NASA collected for us a couple years ago with a model written up and coded. Sweet. So hopping right into things, just a little bit of background information on Titan. Titan's this really sweet moon. It's one of Saturn's moons, and fun fact, it's the largest of Saturn's moon, and the second largest moon is only 2% the mass of Titan. So pretty large celestial body right there. And you can see even here, these distances are the diameters. It's Titan's quite a bit bigger than our moon. Not as big as Earth, but larger than our moon as well. And it's also really chilly over on Titan, like really cold, about 94 Kelvin. And that means it has liquid methane, which I think is pretty sweet. So instead of having a water cycle, it has a methane cycle, which is the same deal as our water cycle, but with methane. So it's got like methane clouds, methane lakes, and it rains methane, which I just think is so snazzy. But specifically looking at the project Dr. Snowden and I have been working on, NASA sent a Cassini-Hughes mission through Titan's atmosphere and collected some data on the ions in the atmosphere with this machinery right here, which is the ion and neutral mass spectrometer, or INMS. I went through and got some information on the densities of these ions at different altitudes. Really high altitudes, like 800 to 1400 kilometers up, really high altitudes. And these ions are created with photoionization, which is pretty much just where ionizing radiation comes in and hits the chemicals, ionizing them. So, moving forward, we want to sort of explain some of the data that NASA collected. You can see here, this is a graph that was worked on by Richards in 2014. These shapes here are the data that is collected directly from the Cassini-Hughes mission. The squares are a different chemical, the triangles are a different chemical, and the diamonds are a different chemical. These solid lines are the model that Richards made. But what we're looking at is, you can see there's this, in the squares, there's this bite out of it. There's like this chunk taken out of it and chunk here taken out of it. Normally we would expect something that's nice and smooth and just a really easy, just nice chemistry looking, where the ions get consumed and used and whatnot. But no, there's this chunk. What we think then is that there's some sort of wave propagating in the atmosphere to change the densities. Specifically, shorter lifespan ions have the steepest bite out. So we'll be looking at those shorter lifespan ions because they have the most obvious sort of bite out of them. So we need to first create a photoionization model, where, as I said, photoionization is where the chemicals in the ionosphere are hit by ionizing radiation and they are turned into ions. And that's sort of what promotes all the chemistry going on there. And this equation here is the continuity equation, which pretty much just explains what's going on in the atmosphere with production terms and loss terms leading up to the densities. So our first bit was we needed to create a photoionization model. There are two parts to this. There's the production, which is seen here, and the loss, which is seen here. These look kind of scary. There's a lot of symbols, a lot of letters, and not a lot of numbers. But pretty much what it is just chemistry. It's mass balances, it's production rates just happening in the atmosphere. Up here you can see sort of an example of what I coded up. This is a reaction that I would write up. Any term that, this is for CH5+. If it is on the left-hand side here, then it is a loss term because it is being consumed in the reaction. And if it was on the right-hand side here, it would be a production equation. So these are all loss terms. And this term here is the reaction rate, where the alpha is because it is reacting with electrons with the photoionization. These other terms are just chemistry happening. And then these numbers, or these other reaction rates, are correlating to chemistry that is happening. And then these terms here are the percentages. So how much of CH5+ is lost due to this equation is 16%. So we looked at a whole bunch of ions. We looked at 16 different chemicals, 8 of which are ions, and there were a total of 19 reactions that I wrote up. That sounds like a lot. Sounds like a lot of chemistry, but in the whole scope of things, It isn't a whole lot of chemistry, and I'll talk about that later as well, because there might be some issues with that. The next bit is our wave function. This is what is going to give us that bite out feature, what we're really concerned about. To really add a wave, though, we first need to split everything into real and imaginary parts. This term here is the wave, with w prime being the wave speed, and this just being a wave as a complex exponent. We know we can split up complex exponents into cosines and sines like this, where cosine terms are all the real terms and sine terms are all the imaginary terms. Which is really nice for us because we only care about the real wave. We like our waves to be real. But with this, we need then to create an imaginary and a real part to the production and loss equations. So this big old thing right here is pretty much the continuity equation, but rewritten to contain a wave, which is this term here, and imaginary and real parts of the production and loss equation. We want to impose a wave on the neutral atmosphere chemicals, the neutral chemicals in the atmosphere, and then the photoionization will go through and carry those neutral species and the waves in the neutral species through the ions. So we're adding the wave to the neutral chemicals, which will then, through photoionization, create the bite out that we are looking for, hopefully. So we got some results. Sweet, that's always good, getting results. We can see here that this is a logarithmic scale. We have waves. We have some waves. Yeah, pat on the back for that one. Good job, Henry. But we have these waves that are being propagated through the ionosphere. These values are way, way up, like I said, 800 to 1400 kilometers in the atmosphere, with the N2H plus being this dotted one and the HCNH plus being this dashed one. We really cared about those specifically because they're shorter lifespan ions, and those give us the sharpest sort of peaks. All of these runs that I'm going to show are from 5,000 second time span, but they have different sort of wave parameters. This one specifically was a 20% perturbation with a 100 centimeter per second wave speed. We can look at the differences here. So this one here is a 20% perturbation and a 50 centimeter per second wave speed, and this one is a 50% perturbation and a 50 centimeter per second wave speed. So fine-tuning the wave will give us different results. It'll make us have different things. And that's where sort of the next steps come in, which I'll talk a bit about later. But we have something that works, which is really sweet. We have something that takes a photoionization of Titan's ionosphere at really high altitudes and can create a sort of bite out. The bite out isn't quite defined yet, but we'll get there soon. Don't worry, don't worry. Sweet, so it's working, and with this information we know a little bit more about Titan. We can sort of make a guess about what the waves look like in Titan's atmosphere, which will give us a better idea of sort of the energy transfer and the whole scope of what's going on in Titan. Now, to get to this future work that I've been sort of teasing the entire time, there's still a bit more to do. As I said, with 19 reactions and the whole scope of things, that isn't a lot. And we might see some of these densities are a bit high, and so adding more chemistry will definitely impact the density value and overall give us a more accurate model. So adding more chemistry is always a good thing. We can also specialize the wave code. As you can see here, this is a nice wave. It's a wave, and it's a photoionization with a wave, but it doesn't have this sharp bite out that we are looking to model, and that just comes from specializing the wave code. We can go through and sort of tweak some of these terms, like how I said, this one was a 20% perturbation with a 50 centimeter per second wave speed, and this one was 100 centimeters per second. Tweaking those terms will hopefully get us to a point where we can have a more direct comparison to the Cassini data. And finally, we can always speed up the code. The code right now is slow. It takes about 2,000 seconds, which is 35 minutes, to run a 2,000 second time span. This just comes from the MATLAB, the program I wrote this code in, doing a lot of math, a lot of math. And there are ways to streamline that, like running in parallel, but haven't worked on that yet. Here are the references, the Vinton on Riches paper I was talking about earlier, but that's everything. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.